Hello, everyone. God bless you, and thanks a lot for tuning in to PNP. It's a great joy today to be able to interview Dr. Tikhon Pino. Dr. Pino is an Orthodox Christian layman, husband to Daria, father of many children, accomplished scholar and patrologist, a member of the Patristic Nectar team working on translations of precious texts from the Holy Fathers. He's the assistant director of the Papist Patristic Institute at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Boston, where he also is a teacher and a dear friend. If you have engaged with PNP for any length of time, you will be familiar with Dr. Pino. He has spoken at a previous Patristic Nectar conference dedicated to the subject of Holy Orthodoxy, presenting the Christian faith, the Orthodox Christian faith, at which he gave a lecture entitled Demystifying Mystical Theology, Knowing the Unknown God in the Church. And he has also sat for an interview with me for this channel. It is a wonderful joy, Dr. Pino, to have you with us today.
Thank you, Father. It's always good to see you.
The occasion for this interview is the recent publication of a new, never before available in the English language, translation of 3 texts from the 15th century Saint Symeon, Archbishop of Thessalonica. These texts are Against All Heresies, together with the Dialogue Against the Latins and his chapters on prayer. I'll hold up a nice, beautiful copy of the hardback edition, which also has the Greek text in it, before we start. So, dear brother, could we start with the saint himself? Who is Saint Symeon of Thessalonica, and why was it important for Patristic Nectar to bring this text Against All Heresies to a contemporary audience?
Yeah, Saint Symeon is a wonderful saint. The work is a wonderful work, and there are a number of really important reasons why this is a thrilling thing to bring into the English language for our people to have access to. Saint Symeon was the successor to Saint Gregory Palamas on the throne of the Church of the Thessalonians, the biblical Church of the Thessalonians. He wasn't the direct successor, but he was in a line of Hesychast bishops that continued St. Gregory's legacy. So he is sort of an icon of St. Gregory Palamas himself, which makes him an important author. He lived at a time in the Byzantine Empire when the empire was continuing to die before the fall of Constantinople. This is a crumbling state where you have Muslims to the east and Roman Catholics to the west. And St. Symeon was a pivotal figure in that period because he was a pastor, first and foremost. He had been a monk, but he had been made an archbishop of this very important see. This is the second city of the Byzantine Empire. And he was very devout, very faithful. He was the disciple of 2 important hesychasts, which you might remember from the Philokalia. These are Callistos and Ignatius. So he's in this hesychastic legacy. And he preaches to his people to preserve them from these multiple threats surrounding the Orthodox faith, not just politically, but spiritually. There's Islam and the pressure to submit to Islam to make your life easier living in a Muslim world. And the same with the Roman Catholic presence, Roman Catholic power. And so he writes this catechesis. It's a very accessible introduction to the Orthodox faith. He writes it for his priests. One of the first things that Symeon does when he becomes Archbishop of Thessalonica is he gathers all his clergy and he puts them on notice that they have to be faithful defenders of the flock, and they have to teach the Orthodox faith in its fullness. And so one of his clergy writes to him, asking him basic questions. And one of the questions that starts out the work is, how do we bring people to the faith? And how do we answer their questions? It's very much a timely question for us as we live in this period of heavy, if somehow subterranean missionary activity in the West, in the broader culture and in the world. And so he gives very edifying answers, but he also gives his interlocutor an overview of the main theological heresies that have arisen in church history, so that he can counter them one by one. He starts with atheism. Again, a very timely subject for us. It's not just about the homoousios and 4th century theology. He starts with these basic fundamental challenges: atheism, belief in God, superstition, idolatry, horoscopes and fate and things like this. This is not an esoteric work of theology. And so Symeon would be followed eventually by people like St. Mark of Ephesus. So a lot of us have heard of St. Gregory Palamas, we've heard of St. Mark of Ephesus, but in between them, carrying this legacy, this Hesychast theological legacy, is St. Symeon, an important link in that chain.
Can I ask you about this genre, this heresiology? Is this a common patristic type of work? And what are the precedents for a kind of listing of heresies?
Yeah, so the listing of heresies, it goes back. It has a long pedigree. Different authors. You think of St. John of Damascus, St. Irenaeus, even earlier, is dealing with Gnosticism and earlier forms of heresy.
Epiphanius of Cyprus is.
Epiphanius of Cyprus has the Panarion, dealing with all heresies. But each author has a specific intention when they're writing. These are not modern books in the sense that we expect them to be. But St. Symeon does stand out here because his, of all of these texts, is the most accessible, in my opinion. It's the least philosophically laden. So it's suitable for the average clergyman, the average seminarian, the average layperson who wants to learn more without getting into the weeds of either the history or the philosophy often, but again, very deep at the same time.
You know, I'm only familiar, I suspect that my experience is many who even know that St. Symeon exists. I'm only familiar with St. Symeon through his liturgical commentaries. I didn't even know that he had this until you brought this to my attention. Praise the Lord. Is that the case? Why is it that St. Symeon is primarily known by English speakers for his work on the services of the church?
So, as with most things, when we're dealing with, especially with translation, we're dealing with things that were first interesting to others who had to then write about them and translate them. So St. Symeon has garnered a lot of attention for his liturgical commentaries because they are admittedly very important and unique. Symeon gives us a lot of information about the development of the Byzantine liturgy. If you've ever heard somebody talking about the monastic rite versus the cathedral rite, these are things that stem from Symeon's writings and the wealth of historical information that he provides in his writings, very detailed examinations of the services of the church. Again, going as deeply as which psalms are said when in the services, what they mean, what the symbolic meaning of this psalm, the censer, whatever it is. And so because liturgical theologians, liturgical scholars have gravitated towards that, the translations that we had of St. Symeon were of these texts first. Now, the text that we have translated now, Against All Heresies, is actually the first part of a liturgical commentary. So the dialogue in Christ, which is the name of this overarching work, begins with dogmatic theology and apologetics, and it moves on to the liturgy, because for St. Symeon, this is all of a piece. The worship of the church begins with the dogma and the worship and expresses itself in prayer. And again, he's a hesychast, so he has this all integrated in his soul, in his mind, and in his work.
For our readers' sake, Dr. Pino, could you expound a little bit on that word, hesychast? This man is an engaged archbishop of one of the most important cities in the empire. He is engaged in the process of evangelization. He's doing apologetical work. He's overseeing priests and deacons and a massive flock. And he's a hesychast. Help us, what is that exactly?
Yeah, so the word hesychast and hesychasm, ησυχία, refers etymologically to stillness. It is the bringing everything to a quiet repose, not just on the outside, but on the inside. And so the word hesychast described in the ancient church the monks who didn't live in big, bustling monasteries, but lived a more quiet, secluded life. So it's almost like a hermit. But in the late Byzantine period, again, around the time of St. Gregory Palamas, the monks who practiced this kind of life, who were trying to still not only their outside environment, but their soul, came under attack. And so St. Gregory Palamas famously comes to the defense of the hesychasts, and he outlines the theology that explains metaphysically and dogmatically how it is that these monks can experience what they experience. Because in the stillness of their soul, of their mind, what they achieve is an encounter with God, specifically with God as a light. And this is a light that fills the soul. We talk about the nous, it fills the intellect, which is the highest part of the human being, but it also floods the body and the lower parts of the human being. It completely absorbs the person. And so this is what we've come to understand as hesychasm. It's this shutting everything else out, even, St. Gregory says, things that are good, meaning sort of innocent distractions, innocent things that sort of take up space in our hard drive. And at the end is this vision of God. And so there were people like St. Gregory Palamas and like St. Symeon who were pastors, who preached, who wrote lives of saints and who wrote theological treatises. And the easiest way to describe this is actually an image that St. Macarius the Great in the 4th century gives us. He says that the diver, when he goes down ever deeper and deeper into the depths, into the darkness, he eventually has to come back with his pearl, with his treasure. For the sake, he says, of those who are consubstantial with him, for his fellow man. And St. Gregory Palamas has the image in his Life of the Mother of God. This is his homily on the entrance into the temple, where he talks about the Mother of God like the setting sun. It disappears for a while, but then it comes back to illumine all of us. And this is what we see in the lives of many hesychasts, where they have this intimate communion with God, but they don't abandon the church. And St. Symeon, in the chapters on prayer, which are translated at the end of this book, and we should say, even though this text appears in the Philokalia, the translation that Patristic Nectar has produced is a little bit longer, so you get a little more meat on the bone there. And he talks about the fact that ησυχία, or hesychasm, this communion with God, especially through the Jesus prayer, is not just for the hesychasts. It's not just for the monks who live in seclusion, but that we all have to quiet ourselves and make time every day, he says. And he says we need to get a schedule for it, to practice the Jesus prayer and to develop as much of this stillness and silence within our souls as we can.
What a marvelous vision. It makes me think of the contemporary Saint Symeon, the Athonite. I believe he described his own hesychastic life as a retreat from the world in order to anchor himself in perpetual communion with God, and then to share with God the embrace of the world. So it's a retreat, the setting of the sun in your imagery, and then the return. What a beautiful vision for your prayer. You mentioned a little bit about the contemporary context that Symeon was living in, with the Muslims on the east and the Latins on the west. Could you develop that a little bit more for us? What exactly was going on in both cases, and how did that inform what we're going to read in here?
Yeah, so these are not generic threats. Thessalonica is on the border of what will become the Ottoman Empire, and there was an active struggle to control Thessaloniki, in modern day Greece, and it was subject. It had fallen to the Muslims before, and it was rescued by Latin empires in the West, and so specifically the Venetians. And so Symeon was very concerned for the practicalities of living under Muslim rulers, living under Roman Catholic rulers. And a lot of that informs especially what he has to say about Roman Catholicism in his treatise, because he's not only dealing with the Latin heresy as a generality. These are not simply polemical overtures. He is dealing with the fact that for the first time in history, at least for his people, Greeks, Orthodox Christians are seeing Roman Catholics up close and personal. Symeon is actually one of the first earliest witnesses outside of the Catholic Church to discuss the old Latin rite, what we think of as the Tridentine Mass, sort of before the Council of Trent. The way that the priest held the host and celebrated the Mass, he discusses these things in detail because he's seeing them. He had probably had relationships with Roman Catholics and had seen Roman Catholic worship. So this is all very real, a very pressing issue for him. It's
And
not
he
abstract.
also falls asleep in the Lord, I think, very shortly, just, a little more than 10 years before the so-called reunion council of Ferrara, Florence, right? Was he involved at all in discussions over that council, the preparation for that council?
He wasn't himself involved, but one of the things that we see in his treatise Against All Heresies is that he's very open to dialogue in the context of authentic reunion and authentic searches for the truth. So one of the things that he says is that he's very willing to give the Pope of Rome, all the honors in the world, all the supremacy in the world, as long as he's Orthodox. He wants, what's important is not some kind of Greek chauvinism, not some kind of Byzantine nationalism, but the faith. And so he's very open, and he talks about the Orthodox popes who were confessors for the faith and who defended the faith, preserved the faith for centuries. And he would like to see a world where the Latins and the Byzantines were reunited within one church.
I was particularly encouraged by his guidance to his flock about how to benefit your neighbor, how to go about the task of evangelization most effectively. I believe he emphasized that it began with prayer, and it continued with spiritual works, beautiful works, and then only moved to the challenge of dialogue and apologetics, etc. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so I have the text in front of me because it's my favorite part of
Oh,
the
good.
of the text. And in a sense, it's the controlling theme that needs to be kept in mind when we read this text, because it does get very polemical. There are things that he says about Roman Catholics, about Muslims, that can come across as extremely harsh. So it's important to contextualize this and to take his advice when we're dealing with texts like this. So he says, he's asked the question, he says, Father, as we have said, there are different beliefs about God among the many nations, with some operating under the delusion that there are many gods and others glorifying a God who is one but not trihypostatic, while others, even if they say that he is, even if they say that there is no God, by what means can we bring these people to the faith? So again, this is a very modern question. And he says, first of all, through conversation with God. So this is the first tool in the arsenal. Then through humility and works of spiritual love, so that our blameless life might witness to the faith as the apostles taught us. So we think of apostolic work as being missionary work, but he says that the apostolic work is humility and works of spiritual love. And lastly, he says, he leaves this for the end, lastly, through the peaceable words, the Irenic words of the divine scriptures, for love of strife and combativeness are alien to the church. So those of us who like polemic, who like apologetics, I think we need to keep this in mind, that we start with prayer, that should be the weightiest thing, then humility, acts of spiritual love, and only then, and in a peaceable context, the actual discussion. And he'll say somewhere else that we do this if people ask us genuine questions. This is not material to fight with or to berate people with.
Yes.
It's to lead people peaceably to Christ.
That is potent medicine for our digital age. Potent
Absolutely.
medicine. Well, thank you, dear brother, very much. May God continue to inspire your sacred work of translation, so desperately needed today, so that we can be rooted in the teachings of the fathers. Really grateful for all your labors. I want
Father.
those who are watching to know that Against All Heresies is available in multiple formats. It's available in this hardback format that has both the English and the Greek text, the original Greek text. It's also available in a much more cost-effective manner, just in English for those who don't need the scholarly apparatus. It also is available as an audiobook and as an ebook. If you want to purchase it, you can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to buy bulk orders at a significant discount, you can just write us here at Patristic Nectar at info@patristicnectar.org, and one of our staff members will help facilitate your bulk order at a discount. We ask your prayers for our continued work and look forward to seeing you next time. God be with you. Patristic Nectar Publications is blessed to present a new publication never before translated into the English language, entitled Against All Heresies, with a dialogue against the Latins and chapters on prayer, by the great 14th century Archbishop and theologian Saint Symeon of Thessalonica. This profound work offers Christians a compact heresiology and a holistic introduction to the Church's theology. Greatly edifying for both clergy and laity, Against All Heresies addresses critical issues of immediate relevance, including the Orthodox Church's relationship to both Islam and Roman Catholicism. This new text is available in two formats, a hardcover edition with the original Greek text or a paperback edition in English. It's also available on audiobook and ebook. Order your copies today at patristicnectar.org.